The first section is a brief introduction to the Uconn driver and the steps to take in determining if it is compatible with your device. The top server user configurable driver allows you to easily create a device driver for serial or Ethernet devices for which an off-the-shelf driver solution is not available. The Uconn driver is also completely integrated into the top server, just like the large number of other drivers in the top server family. The difference with Uconn is that it allows you to configure a set of transactions through the user interface based on the protocol format required by your device. This makes it possible to integrate non-standard devices into your control system in the same fashion as PLCs and other devices with existing drivers. The driver also makes device data available to a multitude of clients. With Uconn, no programming experience is needed. The driver provides access to barcode readers, scales, gauges, or just about anything that supports a serial or Ethernet connection with protocol documentation available. This eliminates the need for expensive and unreliable alternatives. The first step to determining if the top server Uconn driver is for you is to evaluate your protocol by asking yourself the following questions. How complex is it? Determining how complex a protocol is can be a long learning process if you have never done something like this before. In general, most of the devices you encounter will have very simple ASCII or binary protocols. Generally, in these protocols, you make a request for a piece of data that consists of 4 to 5 bytes and then get a response back from the device. One of the things we look for is if the protocol might combine the device ID and command into 1 byte, or if it will require a lot of back and forth handshaking with strict timing requirements. Although these do not eliminate the possibility of using the Uconn driver, they can add considerably to the development time. How is the data presented? This driver supports most of the common data types and formats. What we are looking for is whether the data is ASCII or binary. If it is ASCII, is it fixed or variable length? If it is variable length, is there some way to identify the end of the data with a delimiter or packet terminator? Binary data is much easier to work with, as you will get 2 bytes for a word and 4 bytes for a float. What we check for with binary is if the response is a defined length. If there is no way to determine where the data ends, you will not be able to use the Uconn driver for that protocol. How many items will the driver be requesting? This area is mostly subjective. You have to remember that the driver is processing the transaction commands synchronously. Unless you are requesting tag blocks, every item is requested one at a time. Depending upon your pull rate, the type and speed of communication with the device, and the size and complexity of the packet, you might be able to process thousands of tags or only 100. We generally do not recommend using the driver for large numbers of items per device, especially if they are going to be pulled quickly. How are the packets terminated? In order for the Uconn driver to process the responses from the device, it must be able to determine the endpoint of the data. This is usually done by noting the termination characters for the packet or the number of bytes in the response. In some cases, you may have checksums that occur after the terminators, but that can be easily handled. Some protocols will send a length in the packet to let you know how long the data in the response is. How do we connect to the device? The Uconn driver is essentially a serial driver. You should be able to connect to any device from a serial port as long as you have the proper adapter, or you can also use any PC boards that appear as COM ports to the operating system. You can also use USB to serial converters. We also provide the ability to encapsulate the packet in an Ethernet wrapper for use with serial to Ethernet converters and devices that use TCP/IP or UDP connections. There are some devices that are true Ethernet protocol devices with specialized packets. There are also devices that use Telnet and will broadcast back an unsolicited message once you are connected to them. These types of devices may be able to be accessed by the driver. In these cases, you would want to contact us for further investigation. Is the device a slave or a master? When receiving unsolicited data or messages from slave devices, we have to be able to receive the packet and determine how to handle it. Usually these will be barcode scanners, magnetic card readers, RFID readers, and scales. These types of devices will send back one item or a block of items in a single packet. The next packet will be new data. For these types of devices, you will need only one unsolicited transaction. The devices in question are ones that may have originally been designed to output to an ASCII printer, or which may send back many different packets. For these, you need to be able to evaluate the packet to update the proper tags. We will now look at a few example commands and protocols compatible with the Uconn driver. Here is an example of possible commands for a particular device. We can see that this is a simple protocol. The device is a slave because we make a read request of it. The data is presented as variable length ASCII and it is delimited with commas. Lastly, the packets are terminated with an ETX. Therefore, this protocol can be done in the Uconn driver. Here are some examples of the protocol types we could use in the Uconn driver. These include binary and ASCII. Each example includes a breakdown of the components of the message.